for this part, we will develop a query that will use several tables. Okay, so it will be a multi-table query. We will first create a query that will associate transactions to clients, so we get to see which clients at least had transactions. And then the second query after that will include a third table called the line item. So this way we get to see how the joint command or the joint syntax within the SQL statement for that query works when you have 3 tables or 2 tables. And then we get to see what is or the where statement or the where clause within that SQL statement that controls the relationship between them in terms of synchronizing data from all these tables. So there's got to be a common field that can be used to synchronize such data. And indeed, that is the purpose, again, of a primary key, foreign key, primary key here, and again as a foreign key here. So what we're going to find out is that we will have corresponding records as long as the foreign key exists in the many side, because we have a one-to-many relationship here. So this would be the many. And the same thing, we have a one-to-many relationship, and this would be the many. In other words, you have to have a client ID that already is in here and here for records between these 2 tables to show. Okay, so now let's go ahead and demonstrate that. So we'll go ahead and do a create. And we're going to go to query design. We're going to pick on client first. I'm just going to add that table for now. Okay, so now I am in what we call the QBE, or query by example. Okay, we haven't done anything. If I just double click on the asterisk here, let's see what happens. Okay, so if you run this, this will run all fields. So this is a select star from client, and there is no where clause. So let's look at the SQL statement again. And sure enough, it's select star, or in this case, client.star, which means all fields from client, semicolon. Okay, now let's go back to the QBE, or query by example, and redesign it where I would like to see more specifically a first name, a last name, and that's good. So if I run this, again, as a review, this would be a select client.firstname, client.last name. Oops, I have 2 first names here, so let me just adjust that. That's last name. There you go. From client. So if you run this again, you will get all the records by selecting only these 2 columns. Again, if you look at the SQL statement associated to this, that is indeed what you have here. Okay, now if we were in Oracle, you will see select first name, comma, last name from client. Okay, except here on this platform, they're a little more specific. It's client dot first name, client dot last name. Okay, so that's the only slight difference there. So let's go back to design view, and this time, okay, so we saw that it pulled all the records. I'm going to add an additional table. And let me go ahead and say show table, and I'm going to pick on transactions. Click add and close. Notice it automatically establishes a relationship between them, okay? Right? That links these 2 tables as a one-to-many. So this primary key has a foreign key here. You cannot have a record here that does not exist here. So this, in a way, when we create this joint field between them, will limit the number of records you can see. Aha. So if I run this the way it is, without adding any other fields, I'm going to have a limited number of clients showing up in here, and indeed, those clients will be the only ones who have had transactions. Well, let's see. Let's see if that's true. Sure enough, the list shrunk. Okay, so these are people who had transactions. That's the only reason they're here. Okay, so this is a good way to show, okay, which people bought stuff from me. Okay, so if you had to answer that question. All right, so we could save that and say, we could name this, you notice I'm not even worried about the date. If you want the date, you can add it, and it shows when they had purchases with you. Now, had they had more than one purchase, then there will be several lines of these people. So let me just run here. Here it looks like each one had one big transaction and probably multiple line items. Now, you know what? I am going to go back to the application and pick one of these, let's say Kelly Ripa, and have her start a whole new transaction and see if we get a new record here. So I'm not going to kill this query right now, just leave it alone. I'm going to go back to my application, so go to the switchboard, go to client transactions, pick on Kelly Ripa here, and I'm going to create a new transaction. I'm going to put today's date. And what is today's date? 04/11, 04 here. And that would be an 11/2020. Let's say she bought a couple products here. And let's say she bought a router. And let's say she bought 2 of them. Okay. And let's say she wants to do some networking. She bought a switch. And let's say she bought 3. That's a pretty sizable network right there. Okay. So there. So we've committed her to a transaction on 4/11 with 2 line items. Now let's see what effect that has on our query. So I'm going to close this, close the application altogether. Obviously I need to refresh this. So I'm going to go back to Design View, run it again, and notice now I have 2 entries for Kelly Ripa. I have one here for 3/16, and I have one here for 4/11. Okay? So yes, when you have a Dynaset out of a query, you could have replicate records here that might look like replicate records. This is probably why it's a good idea to maybe add a field to show why. In our case, there is a date associated with that particular purchase. Okay? So, but if you're simply interested in people who had just purchased stuff, not necessarily when did they purchase, then you can go back to Design View and just take out this thing here, which is the date. So let me just cut it up. And let's see if we run it, what happens. It's still showing here. So it's silent, okay? But if you do want the date, just put it in there. Now, we could filter it out where this is all unique later on as a query, or do a count of these people. But right now, let's keep it simple. Let's go back to Design View. It makes sense to leave a date here, so the data makes sense. So again, notice here it's giving me choices. What do I want? Which fields, from which client or transaction fields? And I want, I can double click here, right here, where it says transaction date, and it will automatically be here. So this makes more sense. So I'll leave it here. Okay, good. So if you wanted these to be unique, you could. So that means there won't be any repeated lines here. That's another query later on we could do just to find, as long as you encounter one instance of that particular record or that particular ID, then that's it. For that case, probably it's a good idea to include the client ID. So that way you can filter based on one item. So you're not all over the planet. So you can go back here, bring up the client ID, put it right in the front here. Okay? And now if you run it, obviously you're going to see it twice, 9 and 9 here. But we can concentrate on this field, right, to make the whole Dynaset just show, and then remove the date. You won't need that. Just to show just clients who have had transactions. I don't want to see them again, right? I don't want to see them in a second line. That can be done. but not now. So now we're good here. So this shows what transactions, what date they were done. Can we go further and see what line items? And the answer is yes. You can go back here. You can add another table. Go to show table and go to line item and watch what happens. So line items, let me just close this. Just move it over here. Again, just like our ERD, right? It's a slice of our ERD as seen here. Now this is going to be interesting. So you're going to see more repeating lines because you have several line items. Here you go. All right. So for example, Ripa had 2 line items on that date. So again, it will repeat here. Okay. And again, this would repeat here. Okay. So if you're going to do something like this, you might as well show what item or items were purchased. Okay. So go back to the design, and then you may want to have a product ID and maybe show a quantity here. Okay. So let's see how that works. And there you have it. So this will give you a nice little report that will show you who your clients were that had a transaction, what product did they buy, and how much of it. Okay. Now this query is a little more complete, and we could save this one now as products or purchased products. Okay. So you can call it that and save it. And it will update every time. So here he is, purchase product. Let's go ahead and see if it will update. So let me close. And let me close the ERD here and run the application again. And I'll pick somebody else that I didn't have before. Let me just see who didn't I not have. So let me just, so I am going to pick maybe 19. 19, I don't see client ID 19 here. So we're going to, so who's client ID 19? 19 is Mark Erlings. Okay, got it. Okay, so let's close all. Let's go to our switchboard. Let's go ahead and do a transaction. We're going to pick on 19 right here, Mark Erlings, and we'll have a new transaction today, right? So again, 04, what is today? 11/2020. And let's have Mark purchase. We could expand this a little bit to see what you're buying. A hub, right? So we're into networking. So we pick a hub, and let's say that person purchases 1 hub. Done. Okay. Now let's close everything. Let's go to the purchase products, right? The query purchase products. And there you have it, the last update. Okay, it shows that we have client ID 19, Mark Erlings, on this date, purchased this product and purchased 1 of them. Okay, the next part, we're going to investigate even more queries. But before I do that, let me just show you the SQL for this. And there you have it. This is what we call the join, inner join, right here. And inner join right here. So again, we're joining based on specific where conditions where the transaction client ID equal to client ID. Same thing here, line item order ID equal to the transaction trans ID. Okay? There. Save, and let's close it.